It's been 20 years this week since the Bali bombings in 2002. Two bombs ripped through a pair of packed bars in the district of Kuta. It was Indonesia's worst terror attack.
This is horrendous. I've never seen anything like it. It's huge, it's scary. People are burnt everywhere.
202 people were killed in the Bali bombings, mostly foreign tourists, among them 88 Australians. There was also a huge amount of damage throughout the densely populated area where the attacks happened. Many people were also injured, some severely with extensive burns. The attacks killed people from 21 countries. Well, the attacks were widely blamed on Jemaah Islamiyah, a Southeast Asian militant group with ties to al-Qaida. Now, that led to huge counter-terrorism and de-radicalisation efforts from Indonesia. Though the number of terror attacks there has fallen, there are questions over whether these efforts were too aggressive and overreaching. Our team followed one person who joined a de-radicalisation program and came out the other side.
Living a farmer's life. Something Hendro Fernando could never have imagined possible. The 38-year-old is raising some 4,000 quails at this farm in Bekasi, West Java. It's a complete turnaround from his previous life. Like all workers at this farm, Fernando used to be part of a terrorist network, an ISIS fighter who was involved in several terror attacks in Indonesia. He was arrested in 2016 and released 4 years later.
I used to be like, whoa, what's the latest weapon? How much is that? Now I run this quail farm.
Fernando is one of some 300 convicted terrorists in Indonesia who over the last few years have decided to join a state-sponsored de-radicalization program. Initially, the father of two refused to cooperate.
Then I got to know some fellow convicts in jail who had cooperated with the Indonesian government and had renounced violent extremism. They got me curious. A few weeks later, I asked for access to the library and got it. I started to read and to change and eventually mustered up the courage to pledge my allegiance to Indonesia in 2018.
The de-radicalization program was established after the deadliest terrorist attack in Indonesia's history, the Bali bombing in 2002. The attack killed 202 people, including 88 Australians. One of the terrorists convicted for that attack, bomb maker Umar Patek, also participated in the de-radicalization program. He is about to be released on parole 7 years early. Like other inmates, the former terrorist was rewarded with a reduced sentence after joining the program.
In a de-radicalization program, the challenge is that it always needs to be tailor-made. Take, for instance, Umar Patek. You need to analyze his behavior in prison, understand his interests, learn what skills he has. All that needs to be assessed so that the de-radicalization program works for him and for other former convicts.
Experts agree that simply incarcerating Indonesia's some 500 convicted terrorists for life is not a long-term solution. But as Indonesia's prisons fill up with new terrorist detainees, the state resocialization program will soon need additional funding. Hendro Fernando's neighbor at the quail farm is certainly convinced that the project is worthwhile.
We should embrace them. If we don't, they could go back to where they used to be. We don't need to be harsh on them. We are all one people, after all.
Initially, Mulyono was nervous about his neighbors. Now, he is a frequent customer and often comes to the farm to buy quail eggs. He, like the state, believes the former convicts should be given a second chance.
Let's go to Bali now and speak with DW's Asia Pacific Bureau Chief, Georg Mattis. Hi there, Georg. This is a really significant anniversary of the Bali bombings. Many people, locals and foreigners, have been battling trauma for many years now, 2 decades. How are people there feeling this week?
I would say essentially you have two groups of people. You have, of course, those people who are not just physically but also mentally scarred for life. And I've talked to one person who said she will attend, but she has mixed feelings for it because even the sense of smoke sometimes triggers panic attacks. So she isn't sure how coming back to the very site where the bombing happened for a memorial ceremony will affect her. And then on the other hand, you have people who feel it has quite a healing feature, that it is good for them to confront themselves and to also see that life goes on. And that is something that many Australians, the nation that has been hardest hit with 88 casualties in this terrible bombing, many Australians have said, let's return to Bali for this date, and also to support the country that has suffered tremendously in the pandemic, with tourism only recently bouncing back a little bit.
Georg, there are commemorations of the Bali bombings happening, of course, in Bali, Australia too. What exactly is planned?
Well, you have in Legian Street, the very place where the Bali bombing happened, a memorial, a peace memorial, and there will be a peace prayer tomorrow. There will also be a small ceremony at the Australian consulate here in Bali in the morning. And then, of course, across Australia, you have a number of memorial sites where there will be ceremonies.
Now, Georg, these bombings in 2002 really threw the problem of terrorism in Indonesia into the spotlight. Could you talk to us a little bit more about the efforts that Indonesia has made on counter-terrorism since then?
Quite a number of things here in Indonesia. One amongst them is aggressive police work. So Indonesians have been quite vigilant about, for instance, Indonesian citizens returning from Syria who went directly to jail. Ever since the Bali bombing, more than 1,300 people were arrested on terrorism charges. So quite effective police work. Then we saw in the report, of course, the de-radicalization program. There is lately some criticism regarding the fact that Indonesia has broadened the aspect of terrorist organizations to non-violent organizations. And some have said that makes the target so wide that there could be a political element to it as well. So some people say that that does not exactly help the mission to stop terrorism in Bali and across Indonesia.
OK. Now, one of the main masterminds of the Bali bombings is someone known as Umar Patek. He's due to be paroled soon. How are people taking that?
Well, you have, of course, those amongst them, the Indonesian government itself, who is very proud on its de-radicalization program and say there is no use in locking people up and throwing away the key. You have to de-radicalize people, and Umar Patek is one of those prime examples that is celebrated, a person that is celebrated as a success. He deeply regrets what he has done, and he wants to convict others, other potential terrorists, and also people who are in jail with terrorism suspect numbers rising in Indonesia, that this is the wrong path and they have to return to a peaceful path. And then, of course, you have those victims who have lost their loved ones for life and who argue, releasing someone like him, especially, of course, around a special date like this one, only hurts. And it's also unfair, seeing that they have lost someone for life and he's getting out early.
That was DW's Asia Pacific Bureau Chief Georg Mattis speaking to us on the 20th anniversary of the Bali bombings in 2002. Georg, thanks very much.